What's going on, everybody? This is the first ever the Painted Lines Mailbag show brought to you
By
by by Jay Blevins, NBA Krell. That's me, and then we also have Kai Carlin, who is going to be joining in here in a couple of minutes. We expect and hope that Kai will be a regular on the show. Here Kai comes right now. Let's see if we can get him in here. What's going on, buddy?
the legend, the Philadelphia's own legend.
Dude, I can't even hear you guys.
Let's see.
I can't even hear you guys.
Can you hear? You can't hear us at all. Well, I guess he obviously can't hear us if I'm asking him.
Just the No, the internet connection is not good right now, I guess.
All right, so should we? I guess we'll kick you out then. So we're going to kick Kai for a second here, now that we're getting everything underway. So we do have, it seems like it's a very crazy week we're about to embark on right now. I'm smiling because I have no idea what's going to hit next and when it's going to hit.
Wait, you don't have all the intel?
Yeah, I wish.
Kai, can you hear from me today?
Kai, can you hear us now?
The internet's not good right now, dude. Like you're like breaking up, you're in and out. I can't really hear you guys.
All right, we'll get Kai in later. So it'll be just me and Jason for right now, it seems. And yes, Real Mike Small is right. This is a Brett Brown out of timeout play so far for us. It's cutting. It hits right in the heart, but it does hurt. So
I am distracted. I am really trying to change this graphic up top. So I'm really not on my game.
Yeah. Kai, can you hear us now?
Kai Carlin.
No.
Garbage.
Sad. Just sad. If
this was a Sports Illustrated or wait, I'm sorry, USA Today podcast, his internet would work, wouldn't it?
Of course, that always works. So we do. This does seem like we have a lot to talk about here. So most recently today, it seems as though the James Harden rumors have kicked up quite significantly of the last couple hours, especially once Shams Charania said that James Harden's preferred destinations would be Brooklyn or Philadelphia. And, I got to be honest with you, Jason. I think I might be, overrating Brooklyn's package a little bit, just because I really like Karis LeVert. I think he can be a top 30 player in the NBA.
Me too.
If not already. And, they also have other guys,
Wait, top 30 player?
What?
He's not a top 30 player.
You don't think Karis LeVert can be a top 30 player?
No, I like Karis LeVert a lot. His upside is not top 30, but it's certainly like a top 100 player in the league. Sure.
All right. That's fair enough. So their package sounds like is centered around Jared Allen, Dinwiddie, LeVert, and I think like Taurean Prince or someone else. I forget exactly who it is.
Yep.
Now, the Sixers have become a player, and Daryl Morey has been very airtight. I guess the whole front office has been very airtight so as to not telegraph who is doing what. But it sounds like they're trying to bring in a package, that involves Ben Simmons. So, I'm trying to sort of piece together a deal where Ben Simmons isn't involved. What do you think the possibilities of that are?
So here's why I think the Brooklyn pick on the face of it is definitely a 4 quarters deal, right? So the old adage is you don't trade $1 for 4 quarters in a league where superstars and star players mean so much more than good players. Like the difference, and I think Daryl Morey in his introductory press conference, and certainly Sam Hinkie has talked about this a lot. The difference between a really good player and an all-star player is significant, and the difference between an all-star and a superstar guy who can win you a championship is completely another level. What you've got with Brooklyn is a package of young guys that fans can get excited about, but you don't have any really all-star level players, and you don't have any superstars that you're trading. But for a team in Houston that has real financial trouble, and I think they have very few options on how to generate revenue. One of the ways you could generate revenue is to get a lot of young guys, and the Sixers certainly did this, get a lot of young guys that can excite you. So Karis LeVert is an exciting player. Jarrett Allen is going to make some 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds the kind of kids that buy jerseys, who already have a Harden jersey, already have a Russell Westbrook jersey, fall in love with a player like that who can, catch a lob and dunk. So I think you can put enough of those guys that your fan base can fall in love with onto a team and sell jerseys and generate some revenue and ultimately cut your operating costs. So I think there's a financial component where it does make sense. On the floor, it obviously doesn't make any sense. I think it puts you in the treadmill level of teams where you're not completely bottoming out, where you're, a 35-win team, which makes it really hard to ever acquire that other star. And they should, as Sam Hinkie said in his last interview, you should remember how hard it was to get James Harden. But I think from a financial standpoint and James Harden's ability as a superstar player to dictate where he goes, Brooklyn makes a little bit of sense. How the Sixers do it is a little bit trickier, right? So you have to obviously sell them on a similar type of, without Ben Simmons involved. You have to sell them on a similar concept with Matisse Thybulle. And if you squint, you can maybe see a guy that can get a lot of steals, a lot of dunks. I would be shipping the Shake Milton Clippers game in LA every day. That should be in the owner's inbox, along with either an Al Horford as the mentor or Tobias Harris, and you remind them that Tobias Harris was a 20-point per game scorer, nearly an all-star in LA with the Clippers. So you can put together with the 21st pick and take your pick of the number of the second rounders you'd like to start a reboot of that franchise. So I think you can make a similar case, but it's really hard to pull off without a Ben Simmons, but you really just have to, I don't think, and I've said it since the Morey hiring, or really since Morey left that team, I don't think you can separate the financial situation that Houston has found itself in because of the pandemic from the decisions about their roster. I just don't think you can separate those things.
Yeah, and one thing that I kind of been thinking about is, instead of just doing like a complete tear down, if evidently one of Russell Westbrook and one of James Harden won out, why not use the proceeds of that trade to build around the other? Like, I kind of think if you trade James Harden, and let's say you trade him to the Nets, and you get back Karis LeVert, Prince, Jarrett Allen, and Spencer Dinwiddie, that team around Westbrook I think it's kind of a good team.
I agree with you, but Westbrook's pretty clearly wants out. Yeah,
no, and I agree, and I'm guessing it's probably going to be either the Knicks or Charlotte, because the Knicks can absorb that cap space. I think
Jack, shout out Jack Duffy, but
yeah.
Jack interviewed Mitch Kupchak the other day, it doesn't sound like Charlotte's in the Russell Westbrook part of their development curve.
Well, I mean, today it came out that Michael Jordan was pretty adamant that he wanted him.
That's why Charlotte is Charlotte.
That sounds like ownership. Sounds like ownership. GM.
Welcome to the 40-win club again.
Right. Exactly right. Let's take a quick question here and reminder, guys. This is for mainly for your mailbag. So any questions you have, feel free to shoot us in the chat, and we will be happy to answer. Chris Divler says, "What's your craziest story while on the beat?" I guess this is for Jason.
You've been on the beat. You've been in the facility. You've been. Let's see. The craziest story is definitely the white line fever story. I think it's a long story, but I'll try to make it really quick. So Ben Malice, good friend of ours, good friend of Kai's, from
I know the story. Yeah.
He comes over to follow the Sixers, and he covers them for Pick and Roll Australia for an entire year. So myself, and Kai became really good friends on the beat. And one of the things that you find out is people from other countries just have different slang. So Ben Malice, in a very casual way, says that Ben Simmons had white line fever that night. And I said, what does that mean? I have him explain. And he says, well, when a rugby player or an Australian rules football player can be super nice off the floor, but when they step onto the field of play and they walk across that white line, they become just a mean SOB, right? I said, well, why don't you ever ask Ben about that? He says it would be ridiculous for one Australian to ask another Australian that question. So I said, well, do you mind if I ask it? And he says, no, go ahead. It would be fine coming from you. So that night, or maybe very soon after, maybe the next game, Ben has a really good game. And I asked something to the effect of, do you really feel like you had like that white line fever? And he leans back. Ben leans back at the table and he says, do you want to explain what that means? So
it sounds like another kind of reference.
I give the explanation that Ben Malice had told me, right? The official Australian explanation. And Kevin Kincaid leans up to me, doesn't say anything, but he leans up with a note on his phone and he says, white line fever is a cocaine reference. And I leaned back and I said, I know, but not in Australia. So that's my biggest oh shit story on the beat.
That's pretty funny. I guess for me, it was probably the first time I ever covered the beat, because that was like right after the latest social, during the summer when there were, a bunch of, terrible shootings that happened with police. And Tobias comes right out of practice and says, like, got one thing, and that's Daniel Cameron needs to step up. And then he was just out. And I was like, this is very surreal. This is a very authentic moment from Tobias. And it was just sort of like a powerful thing. Maybe it's something that other people were used to, but for your first time covering the beat, just like, wow, that's all I got.
Energy in person. There's just no way to.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So Jason, let's go back to today's commentary from Vince Rosman and in the press of it, in the media availability. I covered it. You weren't there because you had work stuff to do. Look at you having a job. I have a job too, but yours is more fun. Yours also paid.
I rode the bike to the office today. It was a little cold, but
there we go. Yours pays just a little bit more than mine does, but
now.
So it sounds like
you got the higher upside.
Fair enough. So I think the one thing that I really kind of took away from the media availability, and you and I had this conversation before, was it's kind of fishy that they have it 2 days beforehand, before the draft. When looking at other patterns in previous years, they kind of had a more, I guess, laid out and comprehensive media availability pertaining to the draft, and there were more people available to speak.
Yeah.
And I think you and I both agree that kind of speaks volumes as to what their plan is for the draft.
It could, if in any other year that were to happen, I would say absolutely. That says they're not walking into Wednesday night with a huge plan with a target. I will say that last year, for a solid probably 2 or 3 weeks, every day they had guys coming into the gym. They were running 5-on-5 workouts. They had some filler guys that you knew weren't going to get drafted, but there were a list of names in there that were almost people's top 100 board, if not top 30. And they snuck a few guys in at night as well. But every day you would have 3 players that would talk to the media, and then you would have someone from the front office speak. The fact that today is the only time we haven't gotten really any player availability. We haven't had access to Camden, obviously. But the fact that Vince Rosman was, and he's the head of scouting, was the only person that spoke. And just 2 days before, to me, he says that building through the draft is not number one on their priority list right now.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think also if you kind of read the tea leaves of what Keith Pompey has said, like he's kind of had a couple articles that led off with like draft stuff, even had the headline of draft stuff. It mentioned like one name and then sort of just kind of generalized things. It kind of tells me that number one, they're trying to less and less telegraph their draft picks as they have in recent years. And number two would be that they just aren't so concerned about the draft. And maybe they're thinking like behind closed doors, hey, this draft really isn't anything special. I think that's a consensus around not just us and people who evaluated prospects, but around all people who cover basketball and watch these prospects. It's not a special draft. So why not look to move those picks towards other teams that are more interested in fighting over picks and get something in return for them? And so that's kind of what I think. I mean, a couple of things that stood out to me from today was that one being that they're kind of trying to make sure that they have all of the intel, as much intel as possible, backstories about players, whether rumors out there are true or not, and they're really trying to evaluate and really dive deep into each player. And if a guy is sort of trending upward on the board, why is that? And are you convicted in that belief? And it sounds like they're doing a lot of war room discussion and war room work. But it sounded like today maybe it was just like a very generalized vanilla statement that you would feed to somebody if you just weren't that interested in what was going on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you look at an organization and where they apply their human capital, it looks to me like that there are certainly people that are focused on the scouting side and the draft side. And right now, they're probably prepared to make a pick at 21. They're probably not working the phones really hard to move up. I went through all of your guys' draft prospect stuff. Only one guy to me looked like a guy that I would get excited about, quite frankly, and that was Jalen Smith. And I think he'll be long gone at this point, right?
I think he's a center as well, or power forward.
Is he? Right.
Need another one of those.
And so there's your point, right? So like he's probably early in his development. He probably needs some time. So are you going to sink, even if he were to fall, and there'd have to be some medical reason probably that he would fall, is he someone you'd sink a lot of your cap space, your flexibility, your development resources into? Probably not. So I just don't think it's a high priority for them. And I think they're fully prepared to pick guys in the second round and get them in the gym, work them out, really see what they have, decide on a couple of two-way guys. But I think primarily they probably view 21 as an asset that they would like to be included in some sort of bigger deal that they're probably working on. And it may happen now, or it could be a stash guy. I think there's a really skinny Euro guy that might be stashable.
Pokuševski,
right? That maybe they convince people that he's an asset for a later deal, but doesn't consume cap right away. So, they're professionals. They're really good at this. But do I think we're going to get a draft night, Brett Brown monologue about star hunting and Zaire Smith and Landry Shamet, right? Where he could opine about Landry Shamet and the scouting process around Landry Shamet. I don't think you're going to see that from Elton or from Daryl Morey on draft night. We know the availability for the Sixers will be on Thursday morning. I think that's pretty telling as well. So it just seems like we're now in the phase of the franchise where the draft is not core and central, which is probably different than we really had in 7 years, right?
For sure. And I think just if you look at Daryl Morey's history and what he does, the fact that he likes to front load his starting five with massive money and then really work the margins for the second unit. I mean, Ben McLemore, Daniel House, guys like that were, they're really didn't cost much on the open market.
Yeah.
That's what he's about. And I think the less guaranteed money he's owing a rookie, is probably the happier he'd be. So why would you, not trade back, or you trade that 21st pick for other assets and create more money that you can be flexible with later? I really think Daryl just has it in his head that he's going to acquire some other X factor third piece to this puzzle and somehow get off of Horford or Harris. I think it's going to be Harris. I don't think I think it's going to be Horford. I don't think Harris is movable. I just don't think it's possible.
I think Harris really
isn't a problem. I don't think he's a problem.
He's not a problem. I think everybody really, really likes to shit on that contract. But if you look at where the franchise was, they had one opportunity to spend money, and that opportunity is gone. You get off of that contract. It's not like you have that money to spend. That money's gone. They're over the cap anyway. He's a net plus to the team. He is a great locker room guy. Look, Horford didn't work out. There's lots of teams that could use an Al Horford.
Right, for sure.
That happens.
For sure. Let's go back to some questions here. Stephen K. could very well be my dad at this point. Who knows? What's the most likely and realistic move we make, and what is the most realistic move you want us to do? Ooh, likely and realistic. I don't know the realism of a Harden deal, because I think, number one, where he wants to go the most is going to affect what they do. And I saw a tweet earlier today that I thought was really sort of a good point and sort of the human side of this. I don't think the Rockets are going to be very eager to trade with Daryl Morey after he basically depleted them of all assets, left them when he saw things were going downhill, and then they're going to suddenly trade him a superstar that they had. I don't know that I see that happening. If I had to guess, I would probably say Zach LaVine would be the guy.
That would be awesome. Who are you giving up for Zach LaVine?
It's a great question.
Again, we go back to the Houston situation financially. Chicago has such a proud tradition. They have to be tired of not contending, right? They have to be tired of not winning. They've got a lot of young guys that are really interesting. Zach LaVine has turned the corner as a player, but it hasn't translated into wins.
Right.
Yeah. What do you give up for Zach LaVine, though?
So, I mean, I think you could say, here is Al Horford. Good for the locker room. Stabilizes some of that depth that you need in your front court. He can really serve as a good piece to sort of help Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter Jr. grow. And then you could also attach, picks to sweeten that deal, or like a young guy like Thibault or Milton to that deal. I just think that a guy like Harden is so high above a guy like Zach LaVine, and you also have minds from the Sixers front office planted in Chicago. I mean, let's not forget the Sixers assistant GM. I forget his name.
Mark Eversley.
Mark Eversley is now in Chicago.
Yep.
So you already have that, not a bug, but you already have a seed planted there, which I think can help you in trade talks.
Yeah, you have a communication line. What you don't know is how involved Eversley was in scouting some of these guys. So, does he see a Shake Milton as someone who can really turn a corner and blossom into a true all-star? If so, that makes it a lot easier, obviously. Was he the guy pushing to sign Al Horford as a veteran locker room guy and Embiid insurance? If so, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Is Zach LaVine a pain in the ass right now in Chicago? Because, he wants to be viewed as not just a young Aaron Gordon level player, but a true superstar in the league.
Yeah. And I think one thing that would make it tough is, like, you just hired Billy Donovan. Does Billy Donovan come there only to see his best player get traded 3 months later?
What does Billy Donovan value in players, though?
I guess youth and potential.
I don't know that that's true. I mean, Billy Donovan he turned Steven Adams into a monster, right? So he by
the way, a Horford connection.
And the big Horford connection. So he loves Al Horford. His only championship was won with Al Horford.
Yep.
He took the shot on Chris Paul. So he obviously values veterans.
Yeah.
He also really had a lot of success developing guys like Lou Dort and some other downhill guys. I don't know that the Sixers, maybe Thibault could be pitched. So I think the bones of that deal would be Horford, Thibault, Milton, 21, and something else.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that deal you can get done a lot easier than you can get done Harden. And you don't have to give up Ben Simmons. And I think that's a legitimate big three. LaVine averaged 25 points per game this past season on like 38% from three. I mean, that's not a joke.
He's not a joke. He was a guy I pointed to as a empty stats guy for a long time. He is a legit problem now.
Yeah, for sure. And he still has the athleticism that he had before he tore the ACL. So I mean, he's young. He's on a good contract. I think he's making less than $25 million per year. I think that's a trade that has a lot of upside for the Sixers for sure. If I had to guess, I'd probably say that catapults you into a top 3 team in the East.
I would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, from your perspective, what do you see as the most likely?
I like the LaVine deal, but something still tells me that a Harden deal gets pulled off.
Harden gets pulled off, you think?
Yes, I just think it does.
And you think it includes Ben Simmons?
I don't know that it includes Ben Simmons. I can't tell you whether it does or not. Something's telling me that there's a lot of posturing right now, but they're dancing around a dance that they want to have.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think a lot of people would be very happy if you could get Harden without giving up Ben Simmons. And I think that's a deal that I think Daryl Morey would have to win Executive of the Year for. I mean, that deal right there. I mean, to acquire one of the greatest scorers possibly ever without giving up one of your 2 best players would be unbelievable.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find him to be really hard to watch as far as watching the game of basketball. But when I talk to players, NBA players, his name comes up as the hardest to guard almost every time.
Yeah.
And I've gotten the Kyrie Irving is really hard to guard, but a lot of them off the record will agree he doesn't really lead to wins. Harden is like he's God mode to the players. So his teammates might not love the amount of air he dribbles out of the ball and the amount of, time of possession that he consumes, but opponents absolutely fear him.
Yeah, for sure. Bryant Baker said, let's assume Tobias and Horford are immovable. What's the most under-the-radar move, trade or free agent signing the Sixers could make to make the Eastern Conference Finals this year?
So
I don't know that there is one. I think that's why there's this urgency, why everyone's sort of working the trade blocks. Because number one, teams aren't interested in spending this offseason. They have the huge hit in revenue. The salary cap is right where it was last season. Luxury tax is the same. And there were no fans in arenas for basically since March. And they had a condensed, bubble experience. So I don't think that there really is a huge free agency market. And I think a lot of the guys that would have been available as free agents are opting in because they know that the market's not going to be as great as it could be in a normal year. So they're opting into massive options like Evan Fournier is. I don't know that there is a move under the radar that exists without trading.
Well, I think if you look at how you collect contracts to make a move, it is Mike Scott's $5 million. It is Jay Rich making $11 million. It is Zaire Smith. Don't forget the amount of money he's being paid. It's about 3.5. So you're getting close up into that 18, 19, $20 million range where you could match. So I think the argument you would have to make to a franchise that is struggling financially is that Jay Rich comes off the books after a year, so you have some flexibility on what you want to do. You can basically kick the can down the road. Zaire Smith comes off the books after a year, so if you want to get off of that and save some money, and Mike Scott is matching filler, but you're breaking one large, maybe long-term commitment into 3 smaller pieces that might be more easily movable, and none of the 3 of them are long-term commitments. So if you have a franchise, I hate to keep bringing it back to money, but if you have a franchise that is concerned about their long-term prospects and they think they can survive another year maybe and sell the franchise or turn the corner in a year or 2 years, then you can maybe make that argument that we'll take a 3-year deal on a guy maybe being overpaid. I don't know what Otto Porter makes.
I think it's like 28. I think he opted into $28 million yesterday, I think.
Right, so that wouldn't make that number work. But there's a range of guys making that $18-19 million that if a team wanted to get off a long-term commitment to them, you could maybe package those 3 guys and something else. I think you can get to about $20 million in matching.
Yeah, and I think another name, speaking of opting in, star level player, I think he wants out, and I think they're trying to move on from him, would be San Antonio and DeMar DeRozan. And I think I get it. It's not a great fit. He had the most efficient year, I think, of his career this year as a shooter and scorer. And I think, if San Antonio moves off of LaMarcus Aldridge and, DeRozan they're trying to get off of as well, Al Horford for DeRozan could be something that you look at. But I don't know how that deal makes sense for San Antonio. Why would you add on years of a veteran player's salary when you're trying to get younger? And it's quite obvious. And, if you're trading out Aldridge, you're probably going to get like a high lottery pick. What
about this one? Because I do think Horford makes sense in Toronto. So you somehow make Kyle Lowry for Horford plus work. Toronto pays Van Fleet. They let go of Lowry, both older guys. I know that Gasol's retiring, right?
Overseas, going to play overseas.
Yeah, that's basically retiring.
Fair
And Ibaka is likely going to LA, I think.
Or Houston. I've heard Houston.
I don't think Houston can pay anybody. I really don't. I think they're going to be closer to the floor than the ceiling, than the cap. So I think there's maybe a window where you could do a Lowry for Horford kind of argument. I think you could really argue Horford and Siakam and Van Fleet is kind of a fun with what's the other guy, the
OG Anunoby.
OG. So I think there's an argument to be made. Again, I don't have any rumors. Quite frankly, I haven't talked to anyone from the team about any of this stuff. It's just not the kind of thing that I do. But I think I could see them making that kind of argument.
Interesting. Now, keep in mind, everybody, we are live on Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, and I guess because of Periscope, Twitter. So keep your questions coming in. We're always happy to answer. We're doing this once a week. Remember that. Now, let's go over to Twitter, Jason.
Okay.
Mr. Crockpot says, would you trade Ben Simmons for James Harden? Who are your favorite prospects for the Sixers in the second round? I'll let you go first on that. It seems that's a question that's going back and forth on Twitter all day, not just today, but throughout the last couple of weeks. And it seems that there's no middle ground in existence. It's either got to be you absolutely do or absolutely don't do the deal. Why can't it be in the middle of?
I don't think people realize how much this is not 2K. How much actual power these players have and their agents, right? So Clutch Sports, you say, would you do Ben Simmons for James Harden? What does Clutch Sports want? Because that matters, right? So what does Ben Simmons want to be here? Or does he want to move on and have another team where he's not, where it's catered to his style of play?
Right.
And if the answer is he doesn't want to be here, then you make the move. If the answer is he does want to be here and he is committed to making it work, then it just becomes really hard to move. Was he 23? Has he turned 24 yet?
He's a day younger than me, and I'm 24. So 24.
Okay, he's 24 years old. He just blossomed into one of the top 5 defenders in the league. He's still a nightmare in the full court. And he just has to fix a couple of things around his approach to getting to the line, and how he is willing to set up defenses over the long term versus trying to make the right play every play. So to me, if he wants to be here, I wouldn't move him. No.
And you and I had the conversation previously. I think that the factor that people aren't considering is that sounds great, but what if Rich Paul, what if Clutch Sports, the agency that represents some of the best players in the league, says, if you move our guy to a place that we don't like, we can make life hell for you in the future in terms of people signing with you. So that's a factor that has to be accounted for.
Everybody wants to blame Adam Silver for Sam Hinkie being fired, but just as culpable are the fact that NBA agents were like, we're losing money on one of the 30 teams. None of us are getting paid, right? We're not getting any commissions because this team's not paying anyone. They're taking expiring salary where an agent doesn't get anything. They already got paid for that contract 4 years ago, and they're basically buying guys out, and there's no money flowing into the agents. And that was a big factor in the team's decision to try to rectify that.
Right. Let's go back to Twitter. We're going to go to Zachary East. Would you rather see Horford go to Sacktown for Hield or Houston for Harden?
You take Harden every day. If it's I mean, if you can do straight up, it's centered around Horford, and you take Harden over Hield.
I was trying to find a way to do it respectfully without being like, "What is this question?"
Well, it's just an easy question to answer. It's not a bad question. It's a good question. We haven't even talked about Buddy Hield.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I was having a conversation with someone from Liberty Ballers a couple days ago, and he mentioned to me, and that was a good point, Daryl Morey might not see the value in just tossing endless picks for the sake of Sacramento taking on Horford for Hield, because he might not value Hield in the same tier of player that the fans and some media do. I mean,
he might, though.
He might
really think he can unlock Hield, who's got unlimited range.
Yeah.
Never seen a shot he didn't like.
Yeah.
Morey likes those guys. No,
and I agree. But I also know that Morey likes to really front load his roster with stars, and maybe he doesn't view Hield as a star. Maybe he views Hield as like a tier 2, tier 3 player, and he doesn't find that worth to be Horford plus 3 first-round picks.
Yeah, I don't think it's 3 first-round picks, but does he view Hield as a showcase guy where you bring him in, he's getting a ton of open shots, he shoots 44% from 3 because of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, scores 19 points a game on a team that instead of a 28-win team or whatever Sacramento wins each year.
33.
Instead of putting up empty numbers, empty calories on a bad team, he starts putting up really efficient numbers on a really good team that goes deep into the playoffs. Now you've got an asset that you can trade later on. So even if he thinks he's not a star in and of himself, if he's a showcase type player where in the right, like Eric Gordon, they held on to Eric Gordon, but he's not a star player, but he definitely looked at times like a second star in Houston, right? Just because of the looks that he was able to get there, right? And this is before they got CP3, before they got Westbrook. They knew that he wasn't a star, but there was a period of time where he was probably movable for significant assets.
For sure. Now let's go back to Twitter again. Raiders, Sixers, Yankees says, would you rather trade Jay Rich for Patty Mills or Jay Rich plus Mike Scott for Danny Green? It's a really fascinating scenario. I like that.
I'd rather keep Jay Rich. I think he's better than both of those players.
I guess I'm probably a little lower on Jay Rich than a lot of people are. I felt like, number one, he showed that he really just couldn't handle the ball in any kind of meaningful way this past season. I guess he didn't really know his role either, but I thought his defense was really disappointing as well.
Yeah, I think in general their defense really didn't live up to a lot of the promise, but he's a better player than both of those players, period.
Yeah, and I agree. I just think that he's their only real asset that is easy to trade or get value for. And so I feel like, if someone comes to you with a shooter and says hey, this guy's available.
No, I just think you can find guys that can shoot corner threes. I know Danny Green's been historically really, really good at times in the corners. I don't think Patty Mills is a corner 3 guy. That's where your shots really are gonna come from a lot of times. And he's not that guy. Patty Mills is, very undersized for the NBA. He's not, you're trading a starter for a backup guy. Doesn't make sense to me.
I would probably do the Danny Green trade because you have a three-time champion, a good locker room vet, and it's an easy buy-in role. You're just basically just spacing out the corners and catch and shoot threes.
Why don't you just bring JJ Redick back then? They're roughly the same age, aren't they?
Much different defensive reputations, though.
Yeah, but at that age, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. What do you make of like the Drew Holiday stuff? I love Drew. I think he's a great player. I don't see that. I don't think he's the talent that makes any kind of team pushes any of the teams in the East over the edge to be. This is the hands down favorite.
I like him a ton, but if you just listen to Doc and to Maury, you just all we ever heard was defense, 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 right? Even if they didn't mean it, all the coach speak for the last 7 years was defense, defense. Doc is like, let's score 140 points. Drew Holiday, you bring in because you really want to solidify your defense. But I'm hearing a team that wants to score a ton of points. And he's
sounds like James Harden music right there.
Yeah, or Zach LaVine, or even Buddy Hield. That's why the Hield stuff makes sense to me. I think you're going to trade an overpaid player for another overpaid player. Holiday is clearly a better player than Buddy Hield, but he's got a bigger injury history, and he is older. But he provides you with the backup, with the spot point guard minutes as well. So where you were hoping Jay Rich could be the combo guard and he couldn't, Drew, can be the combo guard. So, but it really matters whether they value good steady play or a bomber who can shoot it from 30 feet and probably shoot 42+% from three on this kind of team.
For sure. So it seems like there's not many questions left to go with tonight. So I'm going to ask you one more before we head out. When does the first trade happen for the Sixers?
My guess is at the draft, but based on the expected media availability, we're probably going to hear from the team officially next on Thursday morning. But that doesn't mean they'd speak that night. So something tells me that we hear that the pick 21 is moved as part of something, right? And it doesn't become official till the next day.
My guess is that something happens tomorrow. That would be my guess. I think they would like to get something done before the draft.
The more I think about this, the more I just think the Hield trade is probably the most likely. Going back to that question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what. If you can find a way to get off of one of the contracts that you gave out last summer, I really think that fans shouldn't be picky and choosy about it because, number one, if you're getting back one of Harden, Zach LaVine, or Buddy Hield, you're getting a quality product back, and you're also given the privilege of having part of the slate wiped clean going forward and really getting some additional flexibility back that you didn't have. So I think fans shouldn't be picky and choosy and say this is not a good enough trade. You take what you can get, I think.
Yeah, it's all context. So it's not matching value for value. We're not in the extracting maximum value out of trades and making a ton of trades to add up over time to get better. We're out of that phase of this franchise. So you need to acquire the players that make your stars better or get yourself another superstar.
For sure.
And all the rest of it is nonsense.
For sure.
Yeah.
I agree. Last question I actually have for you. So this kind of came in my head last second. I feel like Daryl likes smokescreens a lot, and I've been kind of picking up smokescreens a lot with this team. How shocked with you if it ends up being that the trade involves Embiid and not Simmons?
Absolutely floored. Absolutely shocked.
Really?
Yeah. I think he's way too close with the ownership. I think he's too close to the city. I think he, for all of the complaints that people have, there are not that many humans built in so many different ways internationally. His ability to be funny in multiple languages. He really is a unique player. Not unique, but he is a super rare player in the history of the NBA. And those are not the kind of guys that you move on from as your first move as a general manager. I just think on multiple fronts. When you go back through the NBA and you really look at the history of the players that stand out, he's built in that mold, and no one else on this team really is. And, nothing against Ben Simmons. I think he's great, but, Ben Simmons' ceiling looks like another player that you've already seen. Joel Embiid's ceiling looks like no player you've ever seen.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a good way of putting it. He is Jason Blevins, Jay Blevins NBA, the lead Sixers beat writer for the Painted Lines, and also Sixers Insider for 97.3 ESPN. I am Austin Krell. Find me on Twitter, NBA Krell. I am the junior, I guess, beat writer, we'll call it, and generalized NBA reporter.
Yeah.
There we go. As always, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Be back next week for another Mailbag episode. Hopefully a lot more to talk about next week. A lot of things that are in the rearview window and a lot more clarity as to where this team is. Have a good night, everybody, and enjoy the stress and the anxiety of not knowing what's to come.